What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Judy Lewis of strategicobjectives.com. And Judy, before I formally introduce you, I like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And, you know, I've had some interesting, this is part of the top agency series. I had Adit Clevitt. Adit Clevitt is an interesting business. I love hearing these niche businesses, Judy, which is she specializes in creating SOPs for companies. So she's a done-for-you SOP. You go in, you're like, I'm totally disorganized. She'll come in and clean it up, like create SOPs to help onboard teams. And we geeked out on that episode about productivity tools, what tech we use, software, SaaS. So that was a really interesting episode. Another one with my friend and colleague Ian Garlick, who runs videocasestory.com. And what he does is he captures customer stories for companies so they can use them in their marketing. And he's brilliant at that, videocasestory.com. Check those out and many more on inspiredinsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. Judy, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they could just run their company, create great relationships and great content all at the same time. So for me, you know, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share what they're working on, including what Judy's doing.
Thank you.
So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. And Judy and her company are doing amazing work in many arenas. Judy Lewis is a co-founder and partner of Strategic Objectives, and they're Canada's award-winning public relations agency. And their leading independent PR agency specializes in brand building strategies. And they do campaigns for major international and national brands, Body Shop, Maple Leaf Foods, Pringles, and so many more. They're also a purpose-driven agency, which we'll talk about. They've done a lot of work of issues ranging from human trafficking and violence against women to environmental advocacy, sustainability, and even child poverty. Judy, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you. And thank you for taking the time.
Talk about Strategic Objectives a little bit and what you do.
Okay, well, Strategic Objectives, as you mentioned before, is Canada's most award-winning public relations agency, and we are the only agency in Canada to ever win a United Nations award. And we did that for our work in violence against women. So since our founding, which was back in the early 80s, we really decided as former journalists, my sister and I, who started the organization together, we're going to create an agency where we really did good things and good work. And that's really what we wanted to do on an ongoing basis. So we believe that the idea is that brands need to get their message out, that people want to know so much more than just the product. They want to understand what the company is, and also how the company operates within communities. So we really took that message to companies, which was very novel at the time when we first started. And since we have proven over and over again that consumers want to know about the brands, but they also want to know about the company as well. So we set up our company. We started as 2. We are now over 40. We represent, many of Canada's best known brands, most respected brands. Many of our brands are in the top 10. 3 of them are in the top 5 most respected brands in Canada. And we do work for international brands as well and launch them into the Canadian market and then look after them.
Talk about the United Nations Award. What was the campaign and what was the work that you did to win that?
The Canadian government came out with a study that identified that 1 in 2 women had experienced violence against women. And we found that absolutely shocking. And we had a meeting with our client at the time, who we represented for 25 years, actually, the Body Shop Canada. And we said, this is completely unacceptable. They said it was completely unacceptable. And we developed a campaign called In the Name of Love, Stop Violence Against Women, together with the Body Shop Canada. And that ran for several years. And it was such an incredibly successful campaign that it was actually picked up by the global company and then rolled out around the world. This was very innovative at the time. And then from that, we continued to work in the area of sex trafficking. And that in itself was a campaign very much focused on an issue that no one knew existed. And yet it was alive and well in Canada and in the United States. And we rallied Canadians, and more than 500,000 Canadians signed an online petition to help stop sex trafficking. And the Canadian government acted and developed legislation that would make the punishment for such crimes much stronger. And since then, that has really grown into work that we have done. A new organization was founded, the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking. And they actually came to us and said, would you help us name the organization? Will you help us develop the strategic plan? Will you help us launch the hotline? And Canada now does have a national hotline for human trafficking. And we've done very innovative campaigns on behalf of that nonprofit association, the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking. And we most recently did a campaign in the area of labor trafficking, because labor trafficking is a very big issue with migrant workers coming into the country and not necessarily knowing all their rights. And of course, Canadians pride themselves on being kind, generous, open human beings. But like in any country, not everybody plays by the rules. And therefore, there is an issue here with labor trafficking. And this has been very impactful. And as part of that campaign, we have also done communication in many languages, but also particularly into Mexico and Latin America, placing ads, hoping that we will actually advance the education on human rights before the migrant workers even come into our country. So that, again, very important work where we are building the profile of the center and building the brand, but we are also building awareness of a very important issue. So that would be an example of our purpose-driven work.
Yeah. So if someone's listening to the audio only, there is a video piece of this, and you can see we're looking at strategicobjectives.com and on the work page, and you're looking at actually the background image is the Body Shop and Stop Sex Trafficking of Children and Young People. I mean, this is a big issue and big problem. How do you go about tackling this from like a campaign perspective? Like when I think of it, like I don't even know where to start with doing this. So you work with Body Shop. Walk me through how you tackle this type of project.
Well, I think what's really important as communicators is, as public relations professionals, we have incredible power to shape the media agenda and educate publics on important issues. And we at Strategic Objectives take that very seriously, whether that might be for an issue or whether it is for a corporation who wants to make consumers aware of a product, a topic, a commitment that they have made. So fundamentally, the approach is the same. And fundamentally, I would say that we have used our curiosity as former journalists to bring this to life in a very innovative way. But it all starts with research. It all starts with educating ourselves so that we understand something very well, identifying the stakeholders, speaking with the stakeholders, and then bringing about a campaign that will engage the media, engage influencers, and engage them on both a factual and an emotional level so that they can be involved and become actual advocates for the cause. So in many cases, we combine very traditional techniques like the news release and how important that news release is to getting out the important information, real information, factual information rather than misinformation. So honest, ethical information. And then also making and providing spokespeople who can bring the story to life in very innovative and honest ways that engage the public. And then we also believe, and we do a lot of what in our business is called experiential marketing, but that is basically events, getting out, interacting with the public so that we are able to engage them. And in the cases of one campaign, we held candle lighting ceremonies across the country to recognize the women that were involved in sex trafficking or prisoners of sex trafficking, if you will. So there are ways to actually engage people, have people sign petitions, and be giving the public a voice. And I think that is very important, not only for issues, as I said, for brands. So whether we are marketing a new car or whether we are marketing a new color of the year for Benjamin Moore, it is very important to engage people and have them understand the story that brought the product forward and why it is relevant to them.
Let me, there's a lot to unpack there. So what I got is there's a set process, whether it's sex trafficking, whether it's Pringles, it's a very similar process from the research and education to identifying the stakeholders to speaking to the stakeholders. So you're getting it firsthand, engaging the influencers and the media, which may, again, be a number of things. I mean, it could be, like you said, that experiential marketing. It could be paid ads. It could be a newsreel. It could be so many things under that. And then you think of it as like an emotional and intellectual, because people, make decisions based on emotions, right? But we want to back it up with the intellectual things and the facts. And you mentioned, we talked before we hit record about sometimes these things are combating fake news, things that are totally not true. And people have opinions, and there's a lot of gray between people having opinions and fake news. And how do you think about, and you've been a journalist, I know you were a producer at CBC Radio. I mean, you were communications at McGill. Your experience goes way, way back in journalism. How do you balance this thought of free speech and just misinformation that people are sharing? Like I'm wondering, you see something
completely different things.
Yeah. So
they are two completely different things. And we are very committed to free speech. We are Canada. We are a diverse country, and there are many different voices. And that's very important that everybody does have a voice, as long as it is based on fact. So, people are allowed opinions, and opinions are different than facts. And I think that if people state opinions as opinions, everybody has a right to an opinion. If people state information as fact, and we certainly saw this through the COVID pandemic of people claiming fact, which was not fact. And it became very important. And I think it was a prime example of when academics became so very important, when the medical community needed to speak up and correct misinformation. So I do want to say that developing brand campaigns is not formulaic. In other words, there are tactics in which we look at, but each one has to really, I think, become that much better through the use of creativity. And it is our creativity combined with the understanding of what the public is really interested in knowing about, and combining those two things in making good information. Now, we talk all about being storytellers, and we are storytellers. And the idea of storytelling is to take information, honest, ethical information, and make it understandable to many. And I think that that's what we as communicators have this great power to do, is, as you say, unpack a lot of complex information and make it understandable.
I want to talk about brand identity, right? Because a lot of companies will come. What are they asking you for? I don't know if they show up in your door and say, I want a new brand identity. What's the issue that they're experiencing that they're coming to you for? And then I want to talk a little bit about Maple Leaf in this realm. But what, like a company like Maple Leaf or whoever, what are they actually, the issue they're experiencing, but they're actually asking, like, we need to work on our brand identity?
Many of our brands that we work with are well-established companies, so they do have brand identity already, but it is brand identity that is not necessarily well understood, or that it doesn't have what we say legs. It doesn't have different pillars on which it sits to have a personality the same way a person has a personality. So when we do think about a brand, we do say, what do you stand for? What do you do? Like, and they say, well, we're a healthy brand. Okay, well, tell me more about that. And that's where we are very much able to help a brand figure out its story and tell its story in a meaningful way. And I think that that would be a very easy segue into Maple Leaf Foods, which is one of Canada's most highly respected food company. It has many brands under it. We know it most from Maple Leaf, but there are other brands that are underneath the mega brand, if you will, and they are very well known for their product and their deli meats, etc. But people did not understand the incredible work that they had done to become a carbon neutral company. Carbon zero, that is a huge feat for a company. Not really aware of the great work that they are doing in regenerative agriculture, animal welfare, clean ingredients that are going into the feed that is feeding the animals, and the care that it takes in all aspects of its production. Now, in Canada, there isn't really a debate that there is global warming. We accept as a nation that there is global warming, and we have seen it, through the wildfires and the huge swings in temperature and so on and so forth. This is affecting agriculture. That is the first area that is affected by it. And therefore, it becomes very important. So we created a day that was called Little Changes Day. And this campaign has won many awards, and we are coming up to Little Changes Day in November again. And it is a time where we are able to celebrate the company having gone carbon neutral, but also helping consumers understand what they can do and the little changes they can make within their own life to become more sustainable. We did something that was quite interesting, and we created something on their website called the Green Glossary. And when we originally proposed it, the client said, "Well, why would we do that?" And we said, "Well, we know through all our research, the number one thing is not all Canadians really understand what sustainability is. They don't necessarily understand what carbon neutral is." So we created this information, which is now used by many different audiences, including, consumers, schools, and so on and so forth. But it is honest, real information that consumers can engage in, and people can understand a little bit more about what Maple Leaf is doing. We have been welcomed onto many TV stations. Many influencers have, supported us so that we are able to tell this story. And this campaign has been named, best of the best for getting the information out, but also continues to really have impact for the brand. And research is showing that the brand, that movement is happening. So it's very impactful.
Judy, if someone's watching the video, if they're not watching the video, here it is. We're actually looking at the strategicobjectives.com page, and this is some of the work that you did with Maple Leaf Foods, showing the Join the Little Challenges Home Challenge, which looks like it's on November 7th, and then the Green Glossary you were talking about, and some of the other things. And you mentioned, a piece of this. I mean, it's hard. You're kind of distilling all this information into what's digestible, and you're thinking, okay, what's emotional, what's intellectual, and there's definitely art and a science to that. But part of it is also reaching out and having it spread, and you've been very successful doing that. What are some mistakes you have seen people make when reaching out to the influencers or media, and then what are some things that just are tried and true that people should be thinking about when they want to get their message out there?
Well, I think the most important thing is that brands need to be honest in supporting issues. It's not just a marketing campaign. It has to be a commitment from the company. So I would say that the errors that we have seen that we always guard against is what people call greenwashing or pinkwashing, which is using an issue strictly for marketing purposes. And that is not what we do, and we advise against it. And I would say that the companies we are involved with are the companies that choose us because we feel the same way. So we are working with progressive companies who want more people to understand the great work that they are doing, or if they haven't identified it, and this comes back to our brand identity, clients do come to us and say, we need to advance our profile within communities, and we want your help to do that. And that would be a prime example of what we do with Kia. And we created a beautiful program together with Kia called Communities in Motion. And it supports a variety of small community organizations that will advance their ability to become more environmental in one way or another. And that could be in food sustainability. It could be in bicycle repairs, in repairing, kiosks that are setting up in communities where the kids don't have money to have their bicycles repaired. It could be quite a broad number of different initiatives. And then we back it up by supporting the organizations, but then also profiling them to inspire other communities as well.
I'm sure when you were a producer, you probably got tons in still today, we get tons of incoming messages, incoming pitches. There's a lot of incoming information. Before, like now, you probably have great relationships with lots of influencers and media, but before you did, how did you get their attention? Right? Because they're getting in when you were getting flooded with, okay, these 15 companies all sound and look good. And maybe there's another 30 that's like, okay, these are terrible. But how did you break through the noise when you were reaching out to the media?
Since the beginning, we very much positioned ourselves as a switchboard of information. So we were sitting between clients on one side and the media on the other, understanding both and understanding their objectives and being able to put them together in a way that made sense. And I think that there are a lot of public relations people who have not been trained in identifying what journalists really want. And that is why journalists will say sometimes people waste their time. We are very specific in, first of all, choosing outstanding people to join our team, but then putting the time into training them and sharing the background and creating situations where journalists can actually help our people and we help journalists discover great stories together. And we are facilitators. We are not pushers. We are not spin masters. We are people that are really interested in getting good information out to consumers. And I think that that does differentiate them. And I think that when journalists speak to our team and members of our team, because I'm not the only one speaking to people, that they understand that we are coming about it with information that is relevant to them and relevant to their consumers. And that may be on a cookie or it may be on an issue, but there is a story that brings relevance to it.
What made you decide to start your company? You could have gone on this path with being the producer of at these companies, but you chose to start your own company. Why?
I am an entrepreneur, and I guess because I wanted to define my own destiny. And I think that for many years, having worked in media, um, you are not controlling your own destiny because media has, and we've seen it, has collapsed all around us, and that is why there's so many podcasts and why there are so many independent people now. So when we looked at it, having been journalists, the one thing that we identified was the public relations people did not know how to pitch stories with relevance. And we too, excuse me, we too experienced PR people calling us and say, hey, I want you to interview my author. I want you to interview my CEO. And we kind of say, well, why? And that's when the story stopped. So we really, first of all, like every entrepreneur, which started because we had a customer, we had this person that called us and said, we understand you're great communicators and we'd love to have you to start work with us. And it just really built and built and built from there.
What was one of the early milestones you mentioned? I don't know if it was that customer or another, because you've seen quite a landscape it started back in 1983, right? So
Yeah.
what was the first major milestone for Strategic Objective?
Our first client ever was a man by the name of Frank Stronach, who runs Magna International. And that was to help him launch an incredible United Way campaign. So from the very beginning, it was in the idea of helping communities. So I think that that was a milestone. It was also a milestone to understand that someone so high up within the corporate world actually cared as much as he did.
How did he find you?
From there, How did he find us?
Yeah.
Through our media producers, really. He went out and he found journalists who were able to, work in communications. So that's how he found us. And then our early clients was one of our first clients and our largest clients was Marks and Spencer. And Marks and Spencer was coming over from the UK to Canada and had launched one store not very successfully. And they ultimately built that chain up to over 120 stores, which we supported. So we were literally immediately into the retail business. We were into the food business. We were into the fashion business. We were into the retail business. We were we were supporting a publicly listed company. So we were all of a sudden very involved in many aspects of business. And then from there, our clients very quickly grew, whether it might have been the Body Shop or it was Pfizer and the launch of Viagra and taking Viagra out of the category of being a joke to identifying that, this was a very valid drug, that ED was an issue that many men faced, couples faced, and it became a very important health matter that we addressed. So it really kind of started in quite different broad categories. And then we brought in financial services and we were operating in all sectors. And I believe that it is our journalistic background, and I'm not from the fashion industry or the beauty business, but serious journalism, to take that information gathering approach and that curiosity and to decide that I could make that into, together with my business partner, my sister, to take that curiosity and build it into a business.
Talk about your sister for a second. What's it like starting a company and working with your sister?
Well,
I have two siblings, and I mean, at times we fought like dogs, and sometimes it's a love-hate thing, but I think more love than hate.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. I believe it's more love and equally, if not even more important, trust. And trust has been something that Deborah and I have always known that is absolutely fundamental to the two of us, and also something that we believed was fundamental to our success, because our clients trusted us as trusted advisors, and that we would be honest with our recommendations. And I think that in working together with a business partner, you have to be incredibly honest. And as sisters, we could be very honest while being very trusting. And I think, in our early days, we would actually work on the same accounts. And we would, as you say, fight. I don't know if it was fight. I would say debate creative ideas. But the client won because they got the best of the thinking of the two of us. And I think that has been something that has grown within our company. We really do believe two heads are better than one. We believe in collaboration, and we believe it is very important, particularly in the ideation process of coming up with the best ideas, figuring out what research needs to be done, is that when you are working as a team, whether that be two or many, you really can get the best out of that.
What was, to start any company, it's usually one or two people, in this case, you and your sister. What was the first key hire? It doesn't have to be a person, but just position that you're like, we can't do this ourselves. What were some of the first key hire and maybe some key hires that helped you grow your company?
Excuse me. I would say that when we founded our company, from the day one, we said we really wanted to focus on what we did best, which was communications. And therefore, our first hires were in the area of finance and administration, so that we had trusted people who knew what they were doing to be able to do that financial management of our small little company, to advise us. Now I consider myself quite epically, able to do that work, and I can look at balance sheets and very quickly, kind of know exactly what needs to be done. But that wasn't in the early days. So we supported ourselves in the area of hiring people that would complement our expertise. And then as we grew, we brought in other communicators, usually quite junior, and trained them to do things the way that we believe that things should be done. Because and I now serve on one of the communications college's advisory board in the area of curriculum, because that has always been an issue. What are the students learning in school that will be relevant to contemporary communications? And very often the schools are behind. So right now I play a role in, helping the school develop proper programming of what influencer relations should look like. What are the ethics of influencer marketing? How do you bring diversity and inclusion into that area? What are the issues of social media and brand building that you need to loop together?
I have one last question, Judy. Before I ask it, I just want to thank you for sharing your journey. Thanks for sharing your expertise. And I want to encourage people to check out strategicobjectives.com to learn more. And I'm curious, my last question is, any recommended resources? It could be books. It could be maybe just people that you know, that you follow, that were colleagues and mentors that people should check out. But what are some resources that if someone's listening, go, from a business communication standpoint, what should they be checking out?
Well, I think that both in Canada and the US, there are associations in public relations that really do put a lot of information up for free. And whether that is PRSA, which is the Public Relations Society of America, or Canadian Public Relations Society, both of those have exceptional amount of information. There are also numerous podcasts, which really, if you just Google public relations, that's great. There's also a guy up here in Canada called Tony Chapman who runs a podcast, and he has something that talks about chatter that matters, and he interviews a variety of different entrepreneurs and people who have overcome difficulties. So that's kind of interesting. And then I would say, whether it be our LinkedIn, our blogs, our website, there are, whether it's our company or several other of the large communications companies, do put up information where you can learn more. So I welcome, if people want to get in touch, if they want to check out our website and they find something interesting. We are always looking to help brands and have brands be highly successful both in Canada and the United States. And I would say the one thing with influencer marketing and influencer relations, it is completely digital, and therefore we are now doing significant amount of work that is not just Canada, but it is Canada, the US, because our clients span the borders and influencers span borders and have influence on both sides of the border. So that's been a real growth area within public relations, and particularly for our business, whether that particularly for brands, whether it be automotive, food, beauty, anyone that needs to connect with consumers needs to be in social media connecting in an honest, ethical way, and in a strategic way.
Judy, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone check out strategicobjectives.com and more episodes of the podcast. And I want to be the first one. Thank you. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.